For those of you who may not know, my name is Chris Smith. I am the digital campus director here at All Saints Online, St. Andrews. I just want to say a big welcome, mostly to you online. There are people here, but you know I'm about you, okay? But no, I'm so thankful to be up here. And you know, when they asked me to speak this morning, before I even say that, I feel like I have to apologize to our camera people because I'm a walker. So it's like, go ahead, let's do it, okay? That was good. I was watching up there, okay. When they asked me to speak this morning, though, they did something that is always, always, always dangerous. And they said, we don't have a topic. Okay. So they're like, talk about whatever you feel like. And I'm like, all right. And so I did what you should do in that scenario, and I opened up the Bible. And I just started reading, and I started looking, and I settled on these verses that I've read many, many times, but it was overwhelming in that this message that we are commanded to love. So just so you know, if you hear nothing else today, you are commanded to love. Thank you. It's been a great message, okay? Just, thanks. You're not going to get away that easy. But again, good morning, Saints of Andrews and All Saints Online. And I know it's not Valentine's Day, but we're going to talk about love. Because I love love. But we're not talking about love. We're talking about love. That Jesus-sized love. And we're going to start off by reading a passage from the Gospel of John, specifically John chapter 15, verses 9 through 17. And they say, I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because a master doesn't confide in his servants. Now you are my friends. Since I have told you everything the Father told me, you didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for, using my name. This is my command. Love each other. So a couple of things to point out there is, if you didn't hear that, Jesus twice in that passage says, my command is that you love one another. If you love me, you will obey my commands. And then he immediately follows that up by, oh, by the way, my command is that you love one another. All right, so we're going to come back to this passage, but first, since we're talking about love, I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I love. All right, so I'm going to have them up here. So these are some of the things that I love. I absolutely love dirt stock car racing. Okay, I grew up around it. It is like quite literally a part of my family. Like my sister met her husband because she became a fan of his when he was a driver, okay? Like it is ingrained in our family. Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night of my youth was spent at racetracks. Okay, it's a big part of my life. I still love it. In fact, if you go to my house, you will find the door off of a race car that my wife absolutely loves. Let me tell you, okay? The reason why I have that specific one is because I, years ago, got to help build that car and work on that car. So that might be why pieces of it are in our house and not on a track somewhere. But it's like a prized possession. And I say my wife loves it. She just loves that it's no longer on the front porch, okay? Because it was for way longer than she would probably like me to admit. But I also love pizza, okay? I'm just saying, I love it, okay? It doesn't matter, Detroit, Chicago, doesn't matter. I love pizza. I also love traveling. I've gotten the privilege to do that a lot in my life. I love traveling, both near and far. Like, I'm the guy that during the summer, it's like, what's some place that we can drive to in like an hour that I've never been? Let's go do that. And then also basketball. I spent over 10 years of my life playing basketball competitively. I've coached it, I've reffed it. You do not ever want to sit with me at a game, okay? Because I will critique it to no end. And when I get frustrated, I sometimes out of my mouth will come like things that my wife will lean over to me and be like, hey, remember you work at a church? And I'm like, thanks for the reminder, love. But here's some other things I love. I also love my family. I love my wife. I love our children. And I even like 4 of them, okay? 4 out of 5 isn't bad. But I love all of them. No, I absolutely love our family. These are all things that I love, but there's a big difference between the items on that first screen and the people on the second. The biggest difference is that the things in the first slide, I love because of what I get from them. And the reason why I love the people in the second slide is because of what I can give to them. It is a sacrificial type of love. So going back to those verses I read in John, it is important that we understand the type of love that Jesus is talking about in this passage. There's one key verse that helps us to identify the type of love that Jesus is commanding of us here. Looking at verse 13 again, it is a perfect verse for Memorial Day. It says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And Jesus follows this again by saying, and these are my words, not necessarily his, but he basically just says, oh, hey, by the way, I'm your friend. I love you enough to lay down my life for you. Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there, but if we look at this passage in its original language, its original context, we see that laying down your life for a friend was not just this extreme one-time event. The language that is used indicates that this phrase is about choosing to value the needs and wants of others over yourself. So this is a continual choice. It's not a one-time choice. It's something that we continually are called and commanded to do. The type of love that Jesus is talking about is about what you give rather than what you get. So the central theme of this passage here is completely unmistakable. Jesus commands us to love one another in a sacrificial way because that is the way that he has loved us. So let's kind of break this down a little bit here for the next few minutes. The pure love of God requires action. It's not a performance. It's not about making us feel better about ourselves. It's selfless, and we don't get extra credit for doing it. When I was preparing this, I was reminded of a few years ago when many of you will remember this, but we had some floods in this area, and they were horrible. Massive flooding. Many of us know families that lost everything in those floods. And the organization that I was with at the time became kind of this hub for relief resources and whatever just people needed. And so we were constantly like filling up trailers and sending them all around the area. And I will never forget that there was this time when I was helping to fill up one of the trailers, and these 2 people that I had never met before, I don't know, and you know, I mean, I haven't seen since, but they arrived. And they walked into the space that we were kind of staging all the stuff that was going in the trailer. And they walked in, and they each grabbed a box, and they walked into the trailer, and they put it in the trailer. Then they stepped just outside the trailer, and they got in together, and they did a selfie, and then they got in their vehicle and left. God's love is not intended to be like this. Now look, I'm a guy who spends a lot of time on social media, okay? I have no problem with people like bringing to light the things that are happening around them, the good things that are happening around them. But that should be secondary, not primary. God's love does not care even if your heart is in the right place. Now listen to that for a second, okay? Because does it matter that your heart is in the right place? Yes. But it's not just enough to have your heart in the right place. Because his love is selfless, it is active, and it is sacrificial. Jesus didn't just say he loved us, he showed it through his actions. And ultimately, he laid down his life for us. This is the kind of love that we are called to emulate. God's love is not passive. It demands that we step out of our comfort zones and that we actively love others. It's not enough to simply feel love or to say we love, but our love must be demonstrated through our actions. So this might mean offering a helping hand, being present for someone who is in need, or standing up against injustice that we see. And I know that what I'm saying in many ways seems very straightforward, but also it's difficult. There's a misconception that I often hear that says, I love you enough to tell you the truth. We really, really like that saying. We love using it. And I'm even, calling myself out here. I really love using it with my kids. Like, I'm telling you the truth because I love you. In actuality, you're just really annoying me right now, okay? Like, that might be true, but that's not out of love. But we like that saying, especially in the church. And it sounds good, and the idea behind it isn't bad, but the reason why I call this a misconception is because this phrase is oftentimes used as a way to justify calling out others, often harshly. And most of the time we are calling them out because they do not follow along with what we accept as truth. But is this the kind of love that Jesus talks about? Jesus' love is rooted in compassion and understanding. It's not about harsh judgment or criticism. When we say, I love you enough to tell you the truth, we need to examine our motives. Are we speaking out of genuine concern and love, or are we merely masking our judgment? True love always seeks to uplift and encourage, not to tear down. You may have also heard along the way somebody say, because of Jesus, everything changed. Because of Jesus, everything changed. Now, I think that is 100% true. But one thing that hasn't changed is the love of God and the love that Jesus exhibited. Jesus' command to love has not changed. Jesus' arrival marked a significant shift in how we understand and experience love. His life, his death, and his resurrection demonstrated the ultimate act of love, showing us that love is both inclusive and unconditional. And despite this, many of us still struggle to fully embrace and live out this love. We hold on to prejudices, we judge others, and sometimes we even use the Bible to justify our lack of love. But Jesus' command is clear. We are to love without conditions and without exception. And it sounds nice to say that God's love is transforming and just leave it at that. But the reality is that type of love is difficult. I keep coming back to that. This is difficult because it requires us to not only put others ahead of ourselves, but it also requires us to kind of rewire our brains to some degree. I'm going to tell you just a couple of quick stories about that rewiring of your brain, because I will tell you that I am not there yet. I'm working on it. I've been working on it for way too long, but I'm working on it. But let me tell you what that brain that is rewired for the love of Jesus looks like. See, a couple of years ago, my wife and I were scrolling Facebook, like millennials do, okay? We were scrolling Facebook, and we came upon this post, her and I both almost at the same time, of this person who was part of one of our previous churches. And this post was her just saying how upset she was that she had parked her car and her purse had gotten taken out of her car, which is not good. Nobody likes that. But my wife and I start scrolling through the comments, and we just see comment after comment of church people saying, well, I hope God brings down the swift hand of justice on whoever did that. I hope they get what's coming to them. I hope this, and this. And sitting there, I remember hearing my wife say, oh, that's horrible. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's horrible. That is horrible that her purse got stolen. And I'm glad I didn't say that, because the next thing that came out of my wife's mouth was, it's horrible that someone is in a position where they needed that purse more. And then she proceeded to talk about how she hoped that they were able to use whatever was in that purse to get their needs met. Now, I wish that that was my attitude when I first saw that post, but it was not. And I know I'm basically just saying, like, hey, look at my wife. She's a saint. She is. She also cusses a little, but, whatever. She's a real saint, okay? But I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I was like, but here's the thing. That to me was an example that didn't come naturally to me, that I got to witness in somebody else. That's the heart of God. That is the love of Jesus that looks at even a bad situation and says, oh, I hope that Jesus' love is inclusive to everyone, including the people who committed a crime. Another example of how I've seen God's love transform action is when we lived in a very rural part of Iowa. And there was this family there who had a farm. Okay, really, we lived in an area where everybody who lived there had a farm. Like, there were no towns, okay? It was like an hour drive to Walmart, all right? When I say rural, I'm like, you don't hear wind chimes, you just hear banjos. Like, it's great, and I love banjos. But here's the thing. We lived in this very rural area, and there was a family who had a farm, and this particular family for years routinely hired people who were just coming out of incarceration. And they would teach them and train them how to work on their farm, and they would help them get set up with housing, and they would help to make sure that all their needs were met so they could hopefully get back on their feet. And I remember a conversation one day where the farmer was telling me, oh yeah, I have to go and I have to pick up these items because some of them these got taken, so I need to go replace them. And so I started inquiring about, what do you mean they got taken? Well, one of the people that they had hired had taken some equipment and they had left and they had sold it, and they didn't know where they were at that point. And so again, my heart not being fully transformed by the love of Jesus, I was like, well, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? And he goes, I'm going to town and buying new equipment. I just told you that. I was like, yeah, but what about the person who stole from you? And he said something to the effect of, well, I hope that the skills that we gave him and the love that we showed him will carry him through this next part of his life. And he proceeded to tell me that when they started doing that, they absolutely knew that some people were going to steal, that some people weren't going to do the work. They absolutely knew that going into it. And they said that it's more important that we provide people with an opportunity, that we provide people with an opportunity to be loved, to be shown grace, to be shown mercy, to be shown humanity, than for us to protect all of our stuff. That is what being transformed by the love of Jesus looks like. See, the problem is that many times we proclaim with our mouths that God is love, but our hearts and our actions tell a completely different story. There's this disconnect between what we say and how we live. We say God is love, yet we harbor hatred and prejudice and judgment in our hearts. And this is not a new problem. Throughout history, people have used their beliefs to justify all sorts of exclusion and hatred. They've twisted the Bible to fit into their own comfortable narratives rather than allowing the Bible to shape their beliefs and their actions. I firmly believe that we must read and study the Bible, but we must do it in context. We must understand its intended purpose and allow it to transform both our hearts and our minds. And it will not be shocking to say that there are a lot of people who claim to love Jesus but act in ways that reject his entire message. And again, many times they use the Bible to justify these beliefs. And instead of looking at the Bible in context and the way it was intended, they start with beliefs that make them feel comfortable and secure. And then they find ways to use the Bible to justify all sorts of their hate, their bigotry, their sexism, their racism, and so much more. And this allows them to separate people that they don't like or they don't agree with from the love of God. This is why it is so important to read and study the Bible in context and under its intended purpose. Because we must develop our beliefs about Jesus around the Bible instead of what feels comfortable and safe or what someone who believes the same things we do says the Bible is all about. Now, I want to be very careful with that phrasing I just said. Because again, I've heard that exact same phrase used to justify a whole lot of hatred. And today we're talking about love. What I'm saying is that a lot of times we take our beliefs, and people have done this for generations. We decide what we believe, or we really like what somebody else said, and we just hang on to what that person said that we like, and that is our belief. And then we take the Bible and we try to build the Bible on top of those beliefs. The problem is that will always lead us down a path of exclusion and hatred and never towards God's love. Because what we really should be doing is reading the Bible, I say these words again, in context and with its intended purpose, and then build what we believe on top of that. That is the only foundation that truly works when we talk about what it means to love God the way he intended. No matter what anyone says, the Bible can be complex, it can be confusing, and in our modern context, let's be honest, sometimes it's even a little problematic. But in a book that can be so complex, this text today from John 15 is rather simple. Our command from Jesus, not just here, but throughout the gospel stories, is that we are to love. We are to love God, love others. Multiple times, Jesus says, if you love me, then you will follow my command, and my command is love. Not here's my list of commands. He says, yeah, you'll follow my command. My command is to love. That's it. There's no my command is to love if, or my command is to love except. Just my command is to love. The love of God has no prerequisites, no qualifications. It just is. Whether you accept it or not, we can't earn it, we can't get more or less of it, we can't reject it, and we can't deny it for anyone else. The love that God has for you just is. And likewise, the love that God has for all of us, including those you don't like, it just is. And this love is not a performance, it's not a feeling, it is an action. And it is that love that we are commanded to live by. So will you please join with me in saying the prayer that Jesus taught us? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.